Thank you for coming. We'll start with our flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we have any translation needs tonight? Doesn't look like it. Okay, we will move on to the approval of the agenda. At this time, I will accept a motion to approve the agenda.
I will make that motion.
I've had a motion.
I'll second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. We will go ahead and move on to our student reps. Do you guys have a report tonight or anything you'd like to share?
No, I don't have any reports of anything.
Okay. We will move on to board member discussions, starting with Director Gerber. Director Gerber, do you have a legislative report?
Yep, just really briefly wanted to share some of the stuff that WASDA has been putting out about the legislative session. Legislative session is still in full swing, of course. And as we all know, the three big items that WASDA was pushing for schools is MSOC funding, transportation funding, and SPED funding. The transportation bill that they were pushing has died, so that one's not happening. They're still counting on the MSOC bill going through. I believe it passed the Senate and it's going to the House. But they already passed it off with like a lower, they already kind of slashed the money down from what we wanted, what WASDA wanted. So it's still there, and they're still hoping it'll pass through and get more MSOC funding for us. But overall, I think they're was just a little disappointed with how things have gone in the legislative session for the schools this time around. Yep.
Thank you. That is disappointing, but okay, moving next, we're gonna discuss the regional gender inclusive schools. I'm not sure who wants to start with that. Superintendent Perez, would you like to start with that kind of?
Yeah, that item was added to provide an opportunity for the board to discuss the recent action taken in the Moses Lake School District. As we think about our region in the Columbia Basin, Moses Lake, I believe last Thursday, had a board meeting. Some of the contents of their board meeting were published in local media on Wednesday. And it got the conversation going in our area. And so in having conversations with the board members, we do our work in public. We thought it was important to include an item there about where Moses Lake was headed and kind of what the conversations were like across our region and across the state.
Okay. I guess I'll open the floor up to board members to start this discussion.
Well, I'd like to, I kind of agree with what Moses Lake did as a board member. I got daughters, and just speaking, I've always, and I've said this before, I always felt the males shouldn't compete with females in a sport. And so I admire Moses Lake for stepping ahead and go ahead and getting the ball rolling. I think as we as elected, I've heard a lot today that they'd like to get it back to the community and let the community speak on these and let the state speak. And I wish they'd kind of lead that way. I was kind of disappointed with Superintendent Rickdahl, the way he kind of presented. It kind of seemed to be a more of a strong arm, I thought, approach is what he was saying. Because, I mean, if you look what the news reported today, they were saying, I mean, California's already come out, and the governor said that he agrees that males shouldn't compete with females. And I thought that's a kind of a good open-minded, and we as a state should follow suit. I was kind of disappointed in the way Rickdahl explained that the letter and kind of pushed their agenda. But I think if anything, we as elected officials would go out and talk to the community and see what the community, what our constituents would agree on, and then make sure we would come up with a policy. But I mean, if the superintendent's going to strong arm us, I guess we just got to sit and wait. But that's my thought on it.
I'm glad this conversation was brought up tonight, because it gives us an opportunity to discuss it as a board and also start to make our community aware of some of the situations that are going on and how it could affect our community too, especially if we take a further look at these issues and some of the possible ramifications if we do go through with it. But I do agree with some of the stuff that Moses Lake did do. Sports especially. I believe they should be kept separate. I go to look at it. I follow my granddaughter in volleyball very much. And one story that really hit me really hard listening to that is the one on Tuesday night during the presidential address. How he had that one lady that was a volleyball player that took a very severe injury from a transgender athlete. And I could see my own granddaughter in that position for safety purposes. And that's, to me, a lot of it is in safety purposes too. We need to protect all of our students. Unfortunately, it is a very touchy subject with some members of our community. And that's what we're here for, to discuss it, to kind of look through it, see what we want to do as a community, and see what our community will do, what they exactly want us to do too.
So when this topic got brought up to us, we wanted to make sure that everybody in the community knew that we were talking about it and that it was an issue that was brought up and that we weren't trying to hide something under the rug. Like Ken says, I got 3 daughters that play sports. I got a boy that'll eventually play sports, but we also have to, as much as I think about them, we also have to think about the school and what would happen to our student athletes, especially our seniors that are going to play in hopefully their last season. If we were to take some type of measure, we know that the Washington State Superintendent already came down and said that, you know, there would be consequences to that. And so we wanted to let everybody know, the public, that we would like to hear from them, would like to know what your thoughts are. Everybody has kids. This topic hits everybody a different way. There's one thing that I learned from Jake Mendez Jr. was to look at things and try to look at things in a perspective that I don't understand. I only see it because I got 3 daughters and I want to protect them. I don't understand that other side, but what I do understand is that everybody should get a chance to play, to be kept safe, and at the same time allow kids, seniors, the opportunity to play their last sport or even next year because of the consequences that we might receive if we decided to follow suit with Moses Lake. So that is what we kind of wanted the public to know, is we want to hear from you guys. We want to know your guys' take on this. We all have our own ideas and things, but I don't have a senior that's ready to play her last sport, or, you know, after they're 18, they're adults. I don't want to take that away from somebody. And so neither do they, but we want to do what's best for our community. And so we do need to hear from you guys. This is a big decision. This is why I tell Pete that I never knew what we all got put into when we signed up for this deal, but you sure know now. And that's wanting to do the best thing we can for our own kids and all the rest of the kids in this community. So I'm going to ask that the community please reach out. There's 5 of us. Please let us hear you. Make us understand what would be the best thing for us to do, that we might not take under consideration because we're not in a situation that somebody else is in.
So school districts have been being put in a tough spot here, with the federal government saying, hey, you better do this, and the state government saying, hey, you better not do that. And so it's been strange, but as everyone said, I want to assure everyone that we're very aware of this issue. We've been discussing it even before the Moses Lake resolution, and as soon as we heard about the Moses Lake one, we started talking amongst ourselves. We asked Dr. Perez to look into it a bit more for us, and just as Director Burnett said, we want to hear more from the community about where to go from here. Trying to make it the best that we can for all of our student athletes. And like has been said, we've been thinking about the potential consequences for all of our students, one way or the other on this. So please talk to us if you have concerns or questions, and just know that we are aware of this and watching it very closely.
Clearly, I'm the only female on the school board. I did play sports in high school, and I have 3 daughters who play sports. So this subject feels like it hits pretty close to home for me. I know how I feel personally about it, and I feel pretty strongly. But I wasn't elected to represent just my own view. I was elected to represent the view of our community. And so just like the other directors have said and encouraged, we need to hear from the people of the community. I've heard from several saying, why haven't we followed in Moses Lake's footsteps? Why are you dragging your feet? But some is not all. And so we're gonna wait and hopefully continue to hear from people in our community before we make a decision that's best for our students. While I did catch more fish than all of these guys at our last retreat, there aren't many things that I would say. There's a reason why women have their own league and why Title IX exists. And so we're aware of that and trying to take that into deep consideration as we move forward. So I guess we will wait and see from members of the community, and then we'll proceed from there.
I'd like to, I appreciate the board indicating the desire to hear from the community and to hear the different perspectives. And I think at this moment it's important that the community and the students in particular hear from me as superintendent. So I want to share a couple things and challenge the board with a couple of items to consider. When we talked about the dignity index a few weeks ago, it was, and I think I've heard some of it tonight, because what I hear is, man, I want to protect my kids. And then I would hear the exact sentiment on the other side of this. I want to protect my kids. I want them to be able to participate. We agree on that. I think we agree on the value of extracurriculars and participation in schools, and that leads to better outcomes for kids, being part of a team and the lessons learned there. So lots of things we agree on. And as we consider the position that Moses Lake has taken, which what everyone indicates appears to be a clear violation of Washington law, it's in alignment with President Trump's executive order. Again, confusing times. I think we can agree on that as well. There's some conflict here. Now, as you all discuss and consider what we will do as a school district, there's a number of questions to consider, but I'd like you to think about these 3. The first one is around employee rights. So imagine the complexity of this. If we tell our athletic director or a coach to implement a policy which is currently a violation of Washington state law, how are we going to assure that employee that they're protected? How are we going to assure them that the state of Washington isn't going to take their license? How are we going to assure that they're not going to face a civil rights lawsuit because they did what we told them to do? Your only employee is me, right? And you set policy, and I developed a procedure and process to go tell our employees what to do. Considering the safeguards that need to exist for the potential consequences, not only for people who are certificated like me and all of our teachers, but also for a number of our administrators and coaches who are out there doing this every day, that hasn't been figured out yet. And I think we need to move carefully in considering that. The second one about well-being, and I appreciated Ken's comments about the message that President Trump shared was very powerful about the volleyball athlete. You saw her there, her family was there, the story, you felt it and felt compassion and empathy for the individual. What, again, I hope we agree on is that the families of transgender students feel the same sort of compassion for their kids, and I hope we empathize with them, because the data is really clear. Transgender students, marginalized students, LGBTQ plus community students, when you look at the data around it, in the Healthy Youth Survey in the state of Washington, and it's very consistent in Othello, 30% of all kids report a sense of sadness or hopelessness at school. 60% of transgender students do. And sadness and hopelessness and the direct connection to self-harm and suicide is a real thing in that community. And so we should be considering the harm that these kinds of actions might impose on those originally marginalized students. It's as powerful and more pervasive than a student injured in volleyball. It's as powerful. Also, I think we need to consider that we spent an awful lot of time engaging with the community about safety and belonging. It was our first goal area. It was goal area 1, and we only had 3 outcomes. Increase the percentage of students that feel a sense of belonging, increase the amount of time our students spend in our schools because they feel connected, and increase the percentage of students that feel safe in our schools. This kind of policy flies in the face of those goals. It's not going to increase a sense of belonging for a number of our kids, particularly those that already feel marginalized. And then the last one is, I think we need to be very cautious, even in conversations like this, in understanding that our words have so much power, and how do we reconcile our own responsibility to foster a supportive learning environment and not further isolate or harm vulnerable students, because that's what we're talking about here, vulnerability for a particular small number of students across the country and in our community. And the other piece about that, about sort of the size of the impact and whatnot, in a sort of anecdotal, informal conversation with superintendents, I'm not aware of any transgender female athletes in Othello or in our league. And so it becomes this broad national political issue that is influencing our work and our student experience over an issue that hasn't come to be a concern in our schools, hasn't been directly expressed. And I think we have to be so careful in doing something that sends a really targeted message to certain kids over something that's not currently occurring in our schools. And so I guess my message to all of you, and what I feel comfort and safety, and not, I don't think that I'm disagreeing with the board, but what I am saying is we need to deeply consider these kinds of questions and so many others before we move forward. And the action that's occurring in our region and occurring in our state, what I appreciate about your approach is let's pay attention to it, let's see where it goes. In the meantime, let's consider what our words and our actions tell our community and tell our students, because like I've shared many times, they're watching us. They're watching how we treat each other, and they're watching how we disagree, and they're watching how we manage a very complex issue.
Just not a rebuttal, but I also need you, Pete, and I take what you said, and to the comment that I said, I might not understand the side of a transgender child, but at the same time, and you said that the data shows that there might be a sadness or a not feeling part of it. What I don't want it to happen is to take kids that felt part of something and then cause them to not feel safe, or to then cause them
Implementing it. What this feels like to me is it jumped some layers through the executive order, and now it's an attempt to put pressure from the executive level and now from the local level to squeeze everyone in the middle. Hey, President Trump said we're doing this. Hey, the school board said we're doing this. Reichdahl, you better get in line. Washington State Supreme Court, you better get in line. People in Washington, you better get in line. That this pressing on this issue, what I want to step back and remember is every day we have kids showing up in our schools that shouldn't be pressed by these kinds of conversations that we're wrestling with, and we can't be hasty in following down a path that in a state like Washington is going to end up ultimately being a 9-0 defeat in Washington State Supreme Court. You pick some battles for sure. We all pick battles. You pick ones that make sense, and you pick ones that make a difference. And I think we need to, certainly, I hope you hear from constituents and they reach out to you. I hope they do the same with me. But there's also a strategy to deciding which battles we're going to go into and what's the likely outcome. And at what cost? Not only at what cost to the students and the staff, but what cost fiscally to chase something that the outcome is very, very predictable in our state.
The only thing that, and I guess I'm trying to see the light in a very black tunnel, and if it brings anything to this community, it is the ability to once again sit down and have a discussion. Somebody on that side, somebody on this side, to where we can have a sit down and a conversation where it doesn't get heated. It's not you against me, I'm against you, and gets this community talking again, whether it be with activist groups, whatever, but try to find where you can go back to when we could sit down, have a conversation, walk up, handshake, hug it out, and then walk out the door, because that's been lost. So if this issue brings that back, then I hope we have a few more issues like this.
I had a couple questions. Maybe Pete, you can answer.
Yeah.
First of all, Moses Lake had to raise money on their own to do their sports program. Does that put them in a, not to say that they can do their own rules, but since the public, the community raised the money, do they, whatever Superintendent Rickdahl's threatening, are they, because they provided the funding for the sports?
Yeah, I think the issue typically ends up that, you know, that the penalty is going to be a funding one. I think OSPI has been pretty clear. They haven't penalized anyone over these kinds of issues. I think it's going to end up in the courts long before any sort of fiscal impact on kids. I don't Moses Lake. I don't know the politics there. I don't know the people involved. But if I had to think about our own situation, if we had to run a levy a second time and ask voters to approve it, and they had particular interests that they wanted us to follow, we would have to consider, okay, they elected us with a mandate to do these things, and maybe this was one of the issues there. I don't know that for sure. But the funding issue in Moses Lake, I guess if I was thinking pragmatically about it as a superintendent, am I now going to be spending money on legal fees to address this issue, which is, I think, would probably be the bigger concern from a funding source for us. It wouldn't be that I'm worried that OSPI is going to take our funding. I don't believe they're going to go down that road.
Chris, just to piggyback off your question, I think, would it be an OSPI or would it be a WIAA that we would probably, face first, Pete? Would that be the first thing that you think we would face?
Yeah, WIAA is going to have their own interaction with OSPI very soon. I believe the amendments that they're considering around transgender athletes is to be voted on the 26th of March. So I know that OSPI will certainly weigh in on that. If you're the entity that manages our athletes and the amendment that you're recommending violates state law, OSPI will certainly weigh in on that.
I know I read through those amendment changes, and they had some issues for a while and tried to table it, but then they decided to keep them going to the vote. Have we got a vote on that as a district? And have we decided how we're going to vote yet on those amendments?
Yeah, so my understanding is typically it's an advisory vote from each athletic director. So if there are, I don't know the number, but if there are 10 teams in the Central Washington Athletic Conference and 10 ADs show up, and they go around the horn and say, what is your district advising you to vote? Then I'm assuming it would be, well, we got 6 out of 10, we're going to vote this way on the amendment. What I have been hearing, 2 things I've been hearing most recently is a number of districts are choosing to abstain from voting for fear of the backlash from folks who might say, you took a position that violates state law, you supported an amendment that went that way, and so the fear of civil rights litigation related to even taking a position on the issue. The other one is related to what I shared earlier. If we direct our athletic director to vote for an amendment that violates state law, are we putting that athletic director in an inappropriate position? So the window's still open for us to provide counsel and direction for our athletic director, but I think those are some things we need some legal counsel on to make sure, again, we don't jeopardize someone's certificate and we don't jeopardize the district by voting on something that is currently with Washington state law a violation.
So what happens to democracy if they're allowed to vote, right? But now there's a fear factor of them voting. You know, they had a survey out today. 80% of Americans, the U.S., were in favor of males not competing with females, and so now we're asking our athletic directors. We can give them our opinion, and JR and I have met with them, and they're willing to do what we say, but I mean, but now they got a fear factor of voting. Why don't we just if the athletic directors vote, whatever way and then whatever happens, but now there's a fear factor, so no one wants to vote. So we're letting that community win without, I'm not, unless I'm looking at it wrong. Am I looking at it wrong, Ken?
No, I have to agree with you. When the fear factor comes in, that's taking democracy away. That's not allowing us to vote and state our opinion, and no matter which way it goes, we accept the consequences, or not consequences, but the results of it, and we go on with it, and we work with it that way.
Yeah, and I think that they will, I think there will certainly be an opportunity to have a vote. The fear factor, I think if you connect it to the experience of the Moses Lake Board, would be very similar. They took a vote to do something that is a clear violation of Washington state law. Now there will be some consequences that they'll have to manage and litigate and deal with as elected officials, right? What I think is different for employees, what guarantees are we giving our employees if they face consequence or litigation for voting in a particular way? That's the difference, I think, between an elected person and someone in their role and position who's been directed to vote on something that maybe we have, 3 nods and consensus on the board, but is still inconsistent with Washington state law. I imagine situations like this in the next couple of years where an athletic director or superintendent interviews in a particular district and says, what was your position on amendment such and such with the ADs? How did your district respond, right? What are the potential impacts down the road for asking someone? This is, I think if you step back and say, take out the transgender issue and the controversy around these kinds of topics, I think the word used earlier was touchy and sensitive and all those things that exist around this issue. It really is, are we asking people to violate current law, and is that our role? Is our role to establish law, or is our role to uphold the law that's been implemented in the state? And we advocate in different ways. I'm not sure our role is to get our AD to advocate to change the law. I don't know.
I guess what frustrates me with that is during COVID, and I know I've told you this before, Pete, we had to follow the law. And now our state and Superintendent Rechtel was very clear about that message. You will follow the law. This is the law. You will mask. You will follow the 6-foot rule. You will do all of these things. You will stay out of school, etc. Now Washington State doesn't want to follow the law that the federal government has put into place. And they're saying, no, we're not going to follow the law. But once again, we are being held to the standard of follow the law. But the people who are holding us to that standard won't also follow the law. Do you see what I'm saying? Like that's just, it's a frustrating contradiction of, we're 5 people in a community of 10,000 people saying we can't do what our community wants and what works in our community because we're held to a state standard, but the state is not held to a federal standard. And when they are, they refuse to follow. But we yet are still demanded to follow. So it's a frustrating concept to be held to a standard that our governor will not also hold up to.
So, and this is kind of a conversation I think we also need to involve our US congressmen in, our federal level, to, if some of these districts start to move towards that way, what kind of protections are they going to give us, or the employees at the same time? Since this has now become federal law, is the federal government going to come in and stand up and back up for us? Or are they going to step out of it and not say any word? Because then if they don't, then we're out there by ourselves dealing with state issues. So I think this is a really, we need to get them involved in this discussion too. And I know we're not the only district dealing with this subject at the moment, so.
No, I agree. And also, I mean, the ADs work for us, right? The board in a roundabout way. So then they're kind of breaking our rule of not listening to us. And it's kind of how I'm viewing that too. So.
And I had a question for you, Pete, and like I said, with only being a year here, in prior years or whenever these votes for the ADs come up, do the EADs ever come up and ask the board for their opinion and that's how they vote? Or does the AD take what he thinks and votes on it?
No, I think every AD that I'm aware of and every superintendent and school board is having this exact conversation. No one's going out on their own on this one. It's not unusual to ask for counsel.
So that's how it's been like in the past. So
Yep.
this wouldn't be just because of the issue that's going on. He would look to us
Right.
for information or a way to vote.
What's different is the scale and the I guess the intensity of the amendment, because
There's a few of them.
in other years it might have been, are we going to have girls flag football? How would you like me to vote? Right. This is not that issue.
Okay.
So
I just
I do want to touch a little bit on the controversy about whether or not we're following the law. I think it's important to be consistent with the distinction between an executive order and the law of the land. It's actually, my understanding, not law. The executive orders that President Trump is putting out, that's to be determined at the congressional level. And the other subtle difference that I think we need to acknowledge around COVID is many of those executive orders were under emergency provisions. It was a novel experience, and they were emergency orders that our state chose to follow. Because the other thing that whether or not you agree with Inslee or Ferguson or Reichdahl, what I think is hard to argue with is Trump has turned over control around schools to the states. And in our state, we swore an oath to follow state law. When they change state law, we'll follow that law. Now the conversation right now is who's going to get that law changed and in what way and with what urgency and with what speed, and whether or not we want to be at the tip of that spear. That's the conversation. So I do like to make sure people understand that the confusion around whether or not the executive order is actually law, I think we need to remain clear that that's not how the process works. That is, I mean, you talked earlier about an attack on democracy and whether or not that was really here in our vote. I think it's important, if we're going to embrace that part of democracy, we embrace all parts of it. And the rule of law is the foundational component of democracy. So we got to follow the law. And the law in our state says we do these things. And we're discussing doing something outside of that. And are we prepared to deal with, the consequences? And how much does our community want us to chase a change in that law? So.
It's just going to get worse from here. There's some laws that are coming up that they're trying to pass now that are going to make this one look pretty minimal, and so we need to get ready, because it's going to be a fight here in the next few years. If we took an oath to follow law, but we also at the same time, I don't know if we voted for the same law or not. So we just need to make sure that we're all on board, and that we at the end of the day, I know that I can speak for the five of us that are up here. We just want the best for what is for the kids, protect them at all costs, get them an education, and provide an experience for them regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, so.
Okay. Unless anyone has anything else to add, we will go ahead and move on. We have sad news this meeting, that we are losing our director too, Chris Baginski. He is resigning, and I just want to be the first to say how much I've appreciated getting to know you, Chris, and how much I've appreciated your voice on the board, and the time and energy and effort that you have put into showing up, not only to Monday night meetings, but to site visits and school board retreats and multiple extra meetings and executive sessions. This is a very, very demanding role, and you've really taken it in stride, and I really appreciate all of the things that you've done since you've been on the board, and for the things I've learned from you and for the mentorship that you've provided to the board. So thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's, fortunately, I'm going to have to step down to pursue a different career. And but if it wasn't for being on school board, I wouldn't open my eyes to this next chapter of my life. So I'm excited about it. It's been honor and privilege work with everybody up here. It was nice to have that last conversation. We haven't had one like that in a while. So, but everybody in the admin, been pleasure working with everybody there, getting to know you. Everybody on the board, it's been an honor and a privilege. Definitely developed friendships, and I know I can call each and every one of you anytime, and I know that the schools board's still left in good hands and good decisions, and it's been a fun 18 months on the school board. I can't imagine, you, Lindsay and Ken, you guys been on for years, so all the memories. But the last 18 months I was telling Lindsay earlier, I've been on a lot of different boards over my lifetime. So, but the school board, this has been really fun, and it's time consuming, but good time consuming. It's been an honor and a privilege just to boots on the ground and being in the schools, and just the camaraderie, and to be involved in issues like we just got done talking about. So it's been great. I'm sad to do it, but take it one day at a time and see what the good Lord has planned, and that's what I'm looking forward to. So thank you, each and every one of you. It's been a pleasure.
I can't let you go out just like that. I came into this board with you. I walk away with a friend. You're not moving anywhere, thank God, because I'd chase you. Thank you. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for standing up what you believe in. Thank you for listening to a crazy guy every once in a while on an afternoon or a Friday at the bakery, but we're going to miss you. There's something about you that it was just a tip of a glue that you would keep all of us together. Everybody had a piece in this board, and you were a major part of it, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, listen out. That was one of the best things that you had, was an ear, and I appreciate it. And I think you'll do great in the future with whatever you decide to do. But just don't forget, there's 4 of us that are going to miss you like hell, so appreciate it, Chris.
Chris cares about the kids, cares about the community, and we're going to miss him. There's no breaking the eternal bond of catching an alligator together, so always have that.
Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on this board. I know when the 3 of you come on, it was like 3 freshmen coming into a senior class. But you guys jumped up to the top right off the bat. There was no hesitation at all. It felt like me the first year. It took me at least a year to get underneath me first before I was understanding everything that was going on, but you didn't have that problem. You were able to jump right in, be a good contributing member. Actually, no matter how long you're here in this spot, there's still new things that we learn all the time. And I learned a lot from you too, going through this too. So I really appreciate that.
I just shared two things about Director Brzezinski. One is it seemed like no matter what kind of conference we went to, every time he went to a session by himself, he'd come back and say, "Hey, I met so-and-so from here. Hey, I talked." He was always meeting people and sharing and exchanging ideas, whether they were from our state or from across the country. And I appreciated Chris, taking those things seriously when he was there. The other thing that I'll probably never have again, no matter how long I'm superintendent, I got to spend an hour with Chris and Mrs. Garza out at his dairy. And so he comes to our sites and does site visits and, tries to understand what happens in schools. And it was really cool to be in his world for a bit, to help have him describe sustainable farming and the use of equipment and sort of the economics of what is a very challenging industry. And so I appreciated the opportunity to get to know him in his field of employment, and have appreciated him always being consistent in what he believes and how he advocates for kids in our community. So anyone who steps up and serves on a board and takes the risk of putting their name on a ballot, they have my support and endorsement. So thank you for the time you served, Chris.
Okay. We have Hiawatha Elementary School site visit scheduled for March 17th. And Marisa will get us our schedules, and they're also attached to the board minutes. Does that say 8 o'clock? Okay, so 8 o'clock on the 17th. At this time, I will accept a motion to approve required approvals. Sorry.
Wait,
You got something else?
yeah, well, no, on the required approvals, I wanted to discuss something on there.
Okay,
The school calendar for 25, 26.
okay.
We were waiting for you to come back to have this discussion.
Uh-oh. Okay, hit me with it.
So we had, I would like to talk to Pete, and with that 25, 26, I'd like to ask Pete, what are the chances of putting all of the schools on a either trimester or semester, but have all the schools follow the same agenda or same schedule, instead of right now having, some schools on one and some schools on the other, making it difficult. So we wanted to table this until you got back so we could, discuss it if you guys had any discussions on it. But it was something that I wanted to bring up because I think all the schools on the same program or same schedule would benefit, instead of having to have two different ones going on. So, Pete.
Yeah, I appreciate that. This was on the agenda 2 or 3 board meetings ago. I talked with Director Perneda and maybe Director Gerber about in our one-on-twos about the challenges of adjusting particularly a secondary schedule this late in the year. It's usually a couple-year project that we ask schools to consider. The primary concern with the previous calendar, if you'll look at January, on this last calendar, we would have had secondary schools, no school, and conferences, elementary kids in school. That would created some conflict and confusion in the community. In our conversations with the Teachers Association and with our principals, we were able to merge those two activities. So if you'll look at January 22nd, that's the significant change that occurred, Director Perneda. We put both PK-12, we're all going to have that day off. So we solved that problem that had brought up the initial question about creating confusion in the community. So that was our solution for this year, and then continuing to engage in conversations about semester, trimester, but the initial concern was solved by that.
Do you have anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay. Really quick, I forgot that I wanted to also discuss the overnight student travel requests. I know that there had been some questions around maybe not having enough time. If student athletes make it to districts and then they win at districts, that there isn't the timeline between districts and state that we're requesting. So just wanting some clarification from you, Dr. Perez, around the timeline that coaches will be required to give the board when they're transitioning from tournament to the state.
So I want to step back just a bit and say that the reason this is going to begin to appear on the agenda, it's, as you remember, the WASDA review of our policies that we went through, and Marisa has been, an important piece in getting those uploaded and reviewing those and bringing them before the board and back and forth. What we discovered is this has been a policy for a number of years. It's just not something we've been putting in front of the board. I'm not sure when it stopped, but we need to start it back up. So this is our initial attempt to let you know where kids are going, what experiences they're having, how much it costs, those kind of things. We should be transparent with our community. As it relates to those sort of short-term, we didn't know that was going to happen. We're never going to stop a kid or a coach from having an experience because it might be the thing that I communicate with you and reach out individually and say, hey, just know that this is occurring, but there won't be any change to the athlete experience based on us being more diligent about this policy.
Okay, great. At this time, I will accept a motion to approve required approvals.
I'll make a motion for required approvals.
I second that.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. I will accept a motion for required approvals, early accounts payable warrants 2.
I'll make a motion for early payable accounts payable.
I
Approval.
second that.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I will abstain. Motion passes 4-0. Or 4 with an abstention. I don't know what that is. At this time, we'll turn the time over to Dr. Perez.
Yeah, we just have a brief presentation on the OHS, DOHS integration project. And so Assistant Superintendent Jessica Schenk, she's going to have the bulk of the content, but I'll try and support her work here when asked.
Just out of curiosity, we were hoping, Pete, that you'd get up at the podium again. It's so nice to see you up there.
Yeah,
really talk to us.
you want me to go?
Yeah, sure.
As John Wiseman likes to say, I will allow it.
Well, good evening. We are excited to present together now a brief update about the OHS Husky Hub. And that is maybe a new term to you. Up until this point, we've been talking about the DOHS OHS integration. And that work really has progressed, and the naming of this presentation is one piece of evidence around that. So the Husky Hub, once the presentation comes up here, is something that the high school team is starting to talk about. And Hub initially started as we talked about a location on the campus that would kind of be a hub, a place where we would be able to provide these services. And talking with Principal Kat Atkinson today, in part of their planning, the hub, the HUB, actually, they think of it as helping, understanding, and belonging. And I think that goes to the heart of what their purpose is in this work. Just going to pause for a minute because it's much more effective with visuals. And on the next slide, it's also important that we keep bringing back in front of the board and then also in front of ourselves, every meeting that Kat has with her team about this. This is front and center of those meetings. The purpose behind this work is to create systems and resources that ensure all students and staff are known and cared for, and that the adults are equipped to protect and prepare students for success. That means so much to me because if we can if we can pull this off, if we can do this right, we're going to create something really special at Othello High School. One of the things that we also talked about in some of the early planning, and this came out of the focus groups, we talked to 11 different focus groups and got a lot of information back from them about what was important in this work. And so we had 4 goal areas that we were paying attention to, and so I'm going to be talking about 3 of those today: systems of support, technical structures, and ongoing communication. This is a framework that our principals and our directors use quite a bit in our work. So the Lucky Leading, Losing Learning framework, I believe it comes from Douglas Reeves, I believe, is a researcher and author. And so we talk about how when we do our work, we don't want to be successful just because we were lucky. We're successful because we planned intentionally And we know that whatever we did, we can replicate and do again. And so that's what we're trying to do in this work, so that when a year from now, we're able to report out the successes of the Husky Hub, we're going to know why, and hopefully like other districts will come to us and say, how did you do that? Because it's something worth replicating. So systems of support. Last month, the Othello High School admin team and counselors went to Sunnyside High School to meet with their admin and their counselor team. And it was a little bit of like a homecoming for me. I taught in the Sunnyside School District for 10 years. My daughter graduated from Sunnyside High School in 2013. And the consultant that we are working with in this work, he was an interim principal at Sunnyside High School at the time when my daughter was there. And so I was aware of what the high school was like then. I mean, she had a good experience. It wasn't awful, but their graduation rate wasn't what they wanted it to be. And to go back on February 12th and see just the amazing systems that they have in place there, and talking to Kat Atkinson this morning, and she said that visit really helped her see what we are trying to do. Like she could see how all those pieces fit together. So they gave us an overview of the Sunnyside High School journey. We visited classrooms. There was a really fantastic student panel where the students talked to us about what their experiences are and what they believe about their high school. And then the really powerful part was that the counselors and the administrators were working together. This is not work that the admin team at Othello High School can do alone. The counselors are an integral piece of that work. And there's an article that we've been kind of basing a lot of our work on called All Hands on Deck. And so you might hear someone in the high school team at some point talk about AHOD, because we love acronyms in education, so we have to turn everything into one. But that stands for All Hands on Deck. And that is another good visual for the work that we're doing, that we all have to support this and do this together.
Could you go back with just one slide? I do, as we transition to my slide. One of the things we heard at Sunnyside was, I think their graduation rate was around 48%. So at that time in the state of Washington, they would come in and say, you either need to fire your principal, fire half the teachers, or choose this new model. So in Sunnyside, they chose, well, instead of getting rid of 50 teachers, we're going to get rid of one principal and try something different. That was the pressure they put on you at that time. But what I think is important about their journey was, even though their graduate rate was 48, it was actually lower than that because a number of their kids in their alternative school didn't graduate at all either. That's what we need to begin to think about here in Othello. We celebrate a graduation rate, 9 through 12 at Othello High School, but all those DOHS kids are pulled out into another entity and don't impact that graduation rate. Now we're going to be able to really talk about every kid in our system, secondary system, in a consistent way. Now, when we were there, Dr. Salina shared with me what he used to do as a principal. He would ask these 3 questions to students in class. He'd walk in and ask them, and so I gave it a try. I went into, I think, 6 or 7 classrooms, and I sat down with 2 or 3 kids in every classroom, and I asked them those 3 questions. What are you learning about? It's something we all do, and I've done that for years. Number 2, I think speaks to some of the, like, you can't always touch or feel or explain to someone what happens at DOHS. But one of the things I think those students can answer is, if you get stuck, how do you get help? Who do you ask? They know who to go ask. The students at Sunnyside High School, which probably has 500 more kids than ours, probably 2,000 kids at that school, they could answer that question. And then the last one was, it felt odd to me, and so I even prefaced it to the kids and said, "Hey, this might feel a little weird, but I'm gonna. The guy told me to ask this question, so I'm gonna ask it." And so I asked them, "Does your teacher like you?" And their initial response was like, "That's a really dumb question." And then they would launch into, they all said yes. So of the 12 kids I spoke to, all 12 said yes. Then I asked them to define that, and it was things like, she doesn't shut us down. When we have a question, she comes and helps. When we walk in the door, she says hello. She knows all of our names. Those sorts of little behaviors that Chuck challenges us to think about, that's what the students are experiencing on the other end. And so when we are thinking about this integration project for DOHS to OHS, how are those cool things that are happening, and what are those cool things that are happening on a small scale at DOHS? How do we begin to have more of those with more adults at Othello High School?
I'm glad you mentioned the size of Sunnyside High School, because it is a large high school. And one of the concerns that we heard in our focus groups was the concern of how large our high school is already and what that's going to mean when we have more students there. We also heard the concern that part of the reason students like Desert Oasis is because it's small and it feels more comfortable. But I think when we were at Sunnyside, as large as it is, it didn't feel big. The systems and the way that they have things set up felt really comfortable. And so again, that's another goal that we have for the work that we're doing at Othello High School. This slide is actually one that I took from one of Kat Atkinson's slides that she used at a recent staff presentation. She's working with her school improvement team and her counselors. And again, I just want to start giving you some of the words that you might hear her and her team using. The first is CBE, and that stands for Connect, Believe, and Envision. And what really surprised me when we were at Sunnyside is that the students use that too. They talk about the CBE at their school, and they can talk about examples about how they're connected to the school, how they believe in themselves, and how they can envision their futures. And that was really powerful. The other thing that the team talks about a lot is the conceptual framework, and this comes from the Powerless to Powerful work by Dr. Selena. And the idea that we're creating a culture for learning by design, not chance. So think back to that lucky leading, losing, I missed one, lucky learning, that we're leading this work. And so we're focusing on academic press, making sure that students are learning what they need to at high levels, that there's relational trust, and that we are providing the supports, not just for the students, but also for the adults. Okay, technical structures. So this gets into some of the questions that a lot of people have had, like what exactly are you going to do? Can you please give us some details? So one of the first ones is Josh Tovar's position at Othello High School. And I'll let Pete jump in on this a little bit if he wants to, but his official title, he's going to really have two. One is assistant principal at Othello High School, and one is the director of student success at the district level. Do you want to talk about any of the nuances between those two?
Josh certainly has some expertise around some of our intense interventions with some of our students and families that are involved in gang culture. And he also has some of the deepest understanding in the state around how to interact with agencies dealing with truancy and attendance. So Josh will handle some of those issues. All of his work, though, will occur on the Othello High School campus. And this image that you see here is the current technology building, the old district office, that brick building there. And Jessica will talk a little bit about how we're going to utilize that space.
So that space was identified, I mean, as we all know, space is very limited at Othello High School. We did not want to try to put more portables in, and so we were looking at what space was available to us. And that building is right there. And so we started looking at it really closely, space-wise. And so the decision has been made that we're going to be moving the technology department out of there, and Othello High School will use all of the space there with the exception of the server room. That's got to stay put. But the rest of that space is going to be utilized in different ways. And Kat and her team are still working out exactly who will be there. Josh and some of his staff will be there to maintain the online learning program and some counseling supports. There might be other counselors from the high school that have office space there, but that's still a big work in progress. But it is progress that we have identified that building, and now the work is, okay, so where does the technology department go? And at our next update, we'll be able to provide those details. Anything else on that?
No, I know you sometimes get, yeah.
Was this building sitting empty?
No.
No.
It's currently has our tech director, tech service folks, and significant storage area. We etch all the computer equipment in the district. It's a workspace. We did look at the possibility of utilizing the current DOHS because that will be empty. We didn't love that idea because we want to be able to, if we want to sell that, if the board decides we're going to surplus it and do something with it, we don't want to put activities in there, so we're going to empty that out. We have some empty classrooms at McFarland that we considered as a location, but we were trying to limit and sort of the pros and cons discussion around it, putting technical help and sort of maintenance folks in an area with students. It didn't seem that like it made sense for either side. And what this really is going to involve is some rearranging here at the district office that we're working with our staff through.
So those last two pieces, the hub classes, And the teacher assignments, I'm going to save the details on that for the next time Kat and her team are giving you those details. In fact, we have an almost all-day meeting tomorrow where we're working on that very specifically. What's important to know, though, about the hub is it's not just for DOHS students. It's for all students who might need extra help or extra support in different ways. And so that'll be, I think some people have been questioning, oh, you're just going to have kind of take the DOHS students as a group where they are now and just move them over to the high school campus and keep them separate. That's not the plan, but there will be specialized support for them and anybody else who needs it. So the last slide here is ongoing communication. That's another big piece of this plan. Every focus group said we need to have strong communication about this. Each of these bullet points are actually ideas that Josh Tovar provided to me as possibilities. So he's still going to have a very active role in how we reach out and connect with parents in the community and all of you as well. So I won't read those to you, but just different ideas around both written, in-person, and spoken communication so that people have the opportunity to ask questions and give us feedback. And we might think we've got a great plan moving forward, but if we get feedback that we need to maybe make some alterations, we're open to that, and we really do want that feedback. So any questions?
I don't think I have any. Does anybody else?
Any questions from the students?
Well,
Thank
so
you.
from what I'm understanding is the DOHS students will be with like the OHS students, right? So they're not gonna have like their own Husky Pack building, or are they? Or
Not the way the freshmen have their Husky Pack building. I think that the students that are coming from DOHS, they are going to, at least for these first 2 years, be definitely scheduled into those hub classes. So they're still going to have, I think, some sense of togetherness as they're in those classes together, but they will also have other classes outside of the hub as well.
I have a question. So when you say when the DOHS students need support, like what does that support look like?
It's a really good question. And it's different for almost every individual student. So maybe it's extra counseling. It might be work with credit retrieval. So if students are behind and they're worried that they're not going to graduate on time, that might be part of it. The slide that had the picture of the technology building, there's one large room in there that has some outside doors. And we're thinking that that would be a good place for the computer lab for the ALE. So like if students are coming in like either for evening school or they're just dropping in to work on some things because they need flexible schedules, there's really easy access for them and space for them there. We have a lot of community partners who have offices across the district and kind of little cubby holes and places all over, that maybe that there's office space there that we can centralize support. So maybe you're looking for a job or you're needing extra help with transportation, or I mean, there's so many different needs that students might have, and we can make it more one-stop shopping.
Not a real question, just more of I guess a praise just a little bit. I appreciate the information on this deal because it's been constant. And I very appreciate that, and I'm pretty sure the rest of us do, because it's kept us up to date so that if we do get questions, we don't feel like, well, we haven't heard. So thank you for that.
It's important that we get this right. And like I said, if we get it right, it's going to be a really good thing. If we get it wrong, we can't risk hurting kids. And so.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, we will move on to public comment. Our cutoff for public comment is 6:45, or at least before the meeting. So do we have anything that came in before the meeting?
No, I shared that with Mr. Mendez, the logistics of it, and so
Okay.
I'll catch up with him afterward.
Okay. Moving on to upcoming events. Like we talked about earlier, March 17th, we have our Hiawatha site visit, which is at 8 a.m. And then on the 24th, we have our regular scheduled board meeting. Is there anything else?
We have a FFA dinner on March the 15th. If you guys want to go and support the kids for the FFA, it'll
Is
be
it also an auction?
it's a silent auction, live auction, dinner. It'll be held out at
the bull sale, well, Bull Barn, Jeff Schmidt's GR Ranch Bull Barn sale.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that. We bought in the live auction last year, we had bought the labor from the FFA students, and they came out and they built me a chicken coop, like I'm just out of scrap metal and whatever I had there at the farm, and they actually donated extra hours, and they didn't have to, but they were phenomenal. They got a good thing going there, so they were. It was great. So if you guys are anybody looking for, you don't necessarily have to get an item. You can buy labor. So something to keep in mind. So yeah, it's a great cause. Also this Friday, I'm involved with Adopt a Calf program, and some of our 6th grader classrooms have adopted it. But I have a school class, 2nd graders from Odessa coming to the farm. Even though we're not an active dairy farm, there's still some and cattle there, and they adopt the calves at these classrooms come. But they're coming this Friday from 9 to 12, and I'm just inviting anybody else on the board here if you want to come out and see that. But I thought that was kind of neat that another school's coming to visit, and it's been great being involved in it and stuff. So
Good deal. I guess I should have said it during board discussions, but we will be bringing up the discussion of bringing back the Ronald McDonald Farm to the high school. Pete's laughed at me a few times when I've brought it up, but we will be bringing that back somehow.
I just really appreciate the way you say Ronald McDonald.
Hey, that's what I remember it like.
Okay, we will move on to board self-assessment of the meeting.
Good meeting, good agenda. Sad to see my friend Chris step down.
Agreed. I appreciate our board discussion. You know, we aren't always going to see eye to eye on every subject that we talk about, which is what makes America great, what makes our community great, is that we can agree to disagree and still move forward and do what's best for kids. And so I appreciate our board discussion that we had today, and that we that we always have. Appreciate our student reps showing up as well. We miss Miles, but we're thankful for our 2 girls.
great presentation on the Husky Hub. I thought, I know, Pete, you're going to miss my comments of bringing up the past, but Sunnyside was our rival when we were there. So, but it's nice to see that you're working with Sunnyside. They're great, great school to work with. But in my time, they were our rivals. So, but it's great that you got someone, a benchmark to work off of when we're integrating Desert Oasis into the high school. So, yeah.
Okay. At this time, we will adjourn into an executive session for 45 minutes to discuss the sale or lease of a land and the performance of a public employee. This meeting is adjourned.